Games Workshop hinted at today. They released a teaser for a model that's coming out. And the teaser that they sent is this. The reason that's very significant is that is the tip of the spear of Alpharius, known as the Pale Spear. And this is a huge deal for Warhammer. The reason for that is because the Pale Spear is a fundamental plot point, the primary objective of one of the larger Chaos Space Marine novels that came out within the last few years, called Harrow Master. And the other reason is because it could be a hint at what's going to happen in the near future, at least within the Horus Heresy timeline, which will become the Scouring. So the Pale Spear is the spear of Alpharius, and he uses that spear in his final battle versus Rogel Dawn. And the reason that's important is because Rogel Dawn actually ultimately kills Alpharius with his own spear. As far as we know, takes that spear, and that spear is then taken away by the Inquisition. And then the plot of the book Harrow Master is essentially an attempt to recover at least part of the spear, which denotes him as kind of master of the Legion. So we have this kind of massive potential in the future of seeing at least another new Alpha Legion character, or potentially we might even get to see a traitorous Primarch Alpharius return, which would be really cool. Because one of the things that it might be is Games Workshop hinting at the idea that there might be like an Omegon model coming out. And the reason that would be likely is because Games Workshop have released Primarch models for all of the official Primarchs within the Heresy. However, what they haven't done is they haven't released a model for all the Demon Primarchs yet, and all of the characters like Alpharius. So there are these kind of like secondary Primarch options that they're yet to do. And it's probably quite likely that they will get around to this kind of thing at some point, because A, how epic would that be as a model, but also Primarchs sell for a lot of money. So it might be the case that the Games Workshop is just releasing an Omegon model with the Pale Spear, but that in and of itself is weird. Because as I said, as far as we know, Rogel Dawn takes the spear after he kills Alpharius. And so the idea that Omegon is wielding it doesn't really make sense. And so it's potentially Omegon is going to retrieve the spear before he battles Rabute Guilliman in the Scouring. But it's actually really kind of thrown me, because I don't really know what they're going to do with this plotline going forward. Dante, thank you for super chat. Yo, soy Alpharius. Yes, we are all soy Alpharius. Yeah, and that's another thing I wanted to say, is that I appreciate with the Litu video, which did very well, was very popular. I'm glad people really enjoyed it. People were very kind in the comments, and that really touched me. So thank you so much if you said anything nice. That was, really heartwarming. My fiance also read all those messages and was very, very moved. And it's kind of cool to see. But yes, I promise you, I have a plan. So one of the things I have been working on, weirdly, is a set of streams I want to do. So if you are someone that's really into YouTube, you might have noticed that one of the things that people do is like Vlogmas. Now, I'm not going to do Vlogmas so much as I want to do Lawmas. One of the things I want to do in December is I want to stream every single day. And so this month I've kind of been prepping a bit for that. And I've also been working on a big video that will be out hopefully this week. And yeah, my plan is to stream like every day up until Christmas on a different lore point. Now, there are 25 days up until Christmas, and there are officially 20 legions. So that should give you some clue as to what the streams will be on. But I thought that would be pretty cool, and I'd be interested to see how that goes down. So do stay tuned and hit that bell notification. I will see that as well. The videos I've been posting like this week, they haven't been getting notifications sent out. I don't know why that is. I don't know if I've messed someone with the YouTube settings, but do hit the bell notification if you want to stay in tune for that. So glad to watch your videos while I'm doing other stuff. Good, thank you so much. What are you guys thinking of the vertical live stream? It's one of those things that people might hate. I know people might hate it, but at the same time, I'm trying to move with the times. You know, YouTube constantly updating things. Alpharius or Omegon? Well, that's a great question. So one of the big kind of modern plot points around Alpharius and Omegon stems from the book Head of the Hydra, which is also by Mike Brooks. And it was really interesting. So I had a conversation with Mike Brooks, which I put up for members. And when I had that conversation with him, we did speak afterwards about the Alpharius Head of the Hydra. And it's interesting because I, like many of you, will have presumed that what happened in that novel was Alpharius and Omegon kind of switched places, which is something that we know happened quite a lot. However, a lot of people presume that they kind of stayed Switch. And it's a very common presumption that the Alpharius that was killed by Rogal Dorn was there by Omegon because they had switched places. When I spoke to Mike Brooks, he told me that that was never his intention when he wrote the novel. So, yeah, again, it's kind of like a fanon thing that's kind of become canon. There's a few times these things have happened within the lore. Well, it's not officially canon yet, but I guess that's the other thing to mention is that, you know, Mike Brooks did tell me he doesn't own the canon. So it kind of depends what Games Workshop want to do. But he did say that was never his intention when he wrote that, which I thought was really interesting. But officially, it is Alpharius that is dead and Omegon that is not. But yeah, I guess it depends what Games Workshop want to do in the future. But it'll be interesting to see whether they do switch the Primarch, because it was a cool idea, was to leave the original Alpharius alive. But I guess ultimately it's kind of like beside the point, weirdly, because Alpharius and Omegon, they are one soul in two bodies. They're not just like kind of like normal twins. They are a being that is split, and presumably that soul is now united within one body after the death of Alpharius in Praetorian of Dawn. If you read that book, when Alpharius dies, there's kind of like this weird wording around like light, and this passage ends with Omegon realizing I am alone. But there is, I think the suggestion there is that Alpharius and Omegon combine at the end of the book, and you have one Primarch left. So in a weird way, it's irrelevant as to who survived and who died, because it's the same person. You know, they're now one being and now one being. So yeah, that'll be interesting. But the other option, of course, sorry, I should say, is that Harrowmaster becomes the thing. Yeah, it was a very, very good book. One of the best depictions of the Alpha Legion I think we've seen in 40K, certainly. One of the things that book does really well is it takes a lot of time to explain just how kind of disparate the Alpha Legion are. They are really all over the place. It takes you through this kind of variety of warbands, and they're all very different. Some of them genuinely believe they're helping the Imperium. Some of them are purely corrupted by chaos. But yeah, and some of them are up to their Alpha Legionary tricks. Like, for example, one of the things that happens, and this might surprise a lot of people, in that book, when one of the Alpha Legionnaires turns up to this kind of council of Alpha Legion warbands, and he says the phrase, "I am Alpharius," people burst out laughing, because these Alpha Legionnaires are not the original Alpha Legion, and that mentality is so far gone. Like they were created, some of them thousands of years after the Heresy ended. And so it's a really, yeah, like, and it's funny because of course the classic meme within the setting is that all Alpha Legionnaires all of the time think they're Alpharius, but actually, as far as we know in 40K, that's not a very common point of view. And in actual fact, many of them have think of that mentality as kind of childish, which is, I think, probably going to be quite surprising to a lot of people. I literally finished Horus Heresy book 18 today, so kind of hating on Alpharius right now. 18. Deliverance last again. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough, mate. Yeah. Brutal. If you don't mind reading out of order and you want to hate him a little bit more, read Korax Jumps Ahead. That's towards the end, but it's an anthology, and you get kind of like the insight into the brutal aftermath of that. Yeah, but fair enough. I understand not being a big fan. Thoughts on them making it Big E that speaks to Titus? Yeah, good question, man. I thought it was really cool. I mean, again, like, one of the things I've spoken about a lot, and one of the things I'll speak in the stream tomorrow, is about this idea that with the Emperor of Mankind is like officially awakened within the setting. And every time I talk about this, people think I'm like, clickbaiting or something like that. But I can't stress enough how much this is the genuine wording used in the novels. And it's another great example of the fact that the Emperor is now able to say, "Rise, son of Guilliman," which would be pretty cool. I am also, the one thing about the game that I thought was almost sad was that there's so little mention of Guilliman for what I hoped there would be as a big kind of Primarch fan, because fundamentally, Titus was the second captain of the Ultramarines, which means he guarded the body of Rabute Guilliman for a century, and yet when Guilliman's life was truly in danger, he wasn't there to protect him. So I can't wait to see what happens there, and in terms of him kind of getting like true redemption, that's a hell of a way to do it. Omegon and Valdor team up for the Emperor, but not the Imperium. You could do something like that. I mean, Omegon. I think from what I know of that novel, I don't think what I know of Omegon's Alpharius' Primarch novel is that I don't believe that novel was intended to be this official origin. And so whether they'll kind of lean more heavily into that plot line of him kind of being raised by the Emperor, or at least Malcador to some degree, I don't know. But it would be cool. It'd be cool to see. Ingo Peck. Ingo Peck is an interesting one. I guess that's the other thing about the Alpha Legion that I would say is that I don't actually mind that Alpharius or Alpharius Omegon are dead, because the thing that makes them so interesting is that, to me, is that yes, they lose Omegon to Guilliman, but the crazy thing about that story is that they win the day. They actually force the Ultramarines into retreat, and so Guilliman gets this kind of great victory, but the Alpha Legion are able to beat back the Ultramarines without their Primarch, and that in a way is kind of more impressive than having their Primarch alive. I don't think any of the Legion could do that. It was a ridiculous feat. And so in a way, having Alpharius survive would sort of cheapen that. And going to Ingo Peck again, because of the nature of Ingo Peck's storyline at the end, left unfinished, and if he is working with Constantine Valdor, he has this kind of really unique story anyway, and you kind of have enough mystery there that you don't need the Primarch to come back. Aside from the memes, the Alpha Legion have hands down one of the best color schemes. That is true. I also love the black, which is why I think it might be Omegon. And Omegon in the black would be super nice. I would love to see that. It would be cool if it wasn't strictly Chaos or Imperium aligned like Cypher. Well, you know what? There was, when I read Harrowmaster, I remember. When I read Cypher, I remember thinking it reminded me a lot of Harrowmaster, because there's a part in Cypher where they go through, like he kind of has an inner monologue about all of the Fallen that he's working with, and they're of course very different. And that's very similar to me in terms of how the Alpha Legion warband worked. And it was a very kind of similar passage in a way. Because, of course, you have Fallen and an Alpha Legion that believe they're working for the Emperor. Some believe they're have totally given into chaos. And you have everything in between. And so, in a way, there is a huge similarity between the Fallen and the Alpha Legion, which I thought was cool. Chiron was uncouth as a kid. He was. That was a great detail in the book. In the game. I thought that was really cool because, I think I'd have to like pause the game when I got to that moment and just have a think about what that means for him. That's an absolutely crazy thought, but presumably he's one of the oldest Primaris Marines then, and was captured and was one of the ones Belisarius School had in stasis for like 10,000 years, which is pretty nuts. If the Primarch creation and gestation process bore any relation to how default human twins are made, then they split from a single embryo and were quite literally the same single person at one point. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that they've never really confirmed, is whether the Emperor and Malcador knew that they were twins. And I believe it's mentioned that there were 20 cryopods specifically. However, there are some suggestions that the Emperor knew, and generally the Emperor kind of knows everything. So, for example, in the board is set, when they play the game with all the Primarchs, there is an Omegon and an Alpharius piece, I believe on opposite sides. I'd have to double check that, I'm pretty certain. So I think the idea is that the Emperor probably knew about them. Heresy. I just played Space Marine 2. I didn't know Chiron was from the Heresy. Yeah, I mean, he was a boy during the betrayal at Calth, but yeah, certainly he saw that. So that was a really cool detail, because of course he in the game he throws himself at the Thousand Suns when they pop up, and when that happened, I don't know about you guys, I thought they're going to do down is he being corrupted by Khorne or something? Is that the idea? But it turns out that actually he just was incensed at the sight of traitors, because of course they destroyed, mostly destroyed his own son. So by which I mean the the word bearers nearly destroy the sun that Calth orbits with a very powerful weapon. So Chiron's obviously not a plan, not a fan. Sorry. It makes sense for head of the Hydra to be a lie. The Emperor, Malcator, and the Custodians all call Horus the first found in their heads and themselves. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I did think that as well, Christian, because every time I say first found, which I like as a title for Horus, and every time I read one of the passages where they say it, I did always think like someone's going to comment. But then at the same time, I was like, oh no, it's good for the whole YouTube algorithm. So maybe having them comments not so bad. But yeah, you make a very good point. They need one Alpha Legion Primarch alive. Well, how do they do? Because that's the thing, right? Is that if they have an Alpha Legion Primarch alive, it kind of throws the balance off a little bit. All the other traitor Primarchs are demons. And so you'd have this one other kind of Primarch that wasn't a demon, and that kind of puts something like Abaddon's position into doubt, which I don't think they would want to replace Abaddon with like Omegon. But at the same time, all of a sudden, there's a natural leader or a natural person to replace Horus, because the demon Primarchs are disqualified by stint of them not being based within our reality. And so it's, all of a sudden you have this kind of loyalist Primarch, traitor Primarch, that could maybe be a new War Master, which is kind of cool. But yeah, although actually I'm pretty certain Alpharius threatens Abaddon at one point in time, which is quite funny. For me, the best enemies of the Imperium are not those tied to chaos. They actually have depth. I think it depends. I get that. I do. I think it depends a bit on how they're written. So like Night Lords, for example, are still kind of tied to chaos, of course, but they have a huge amount of depth. Abaddon, I actually think, has a huge amount of depth as a character, which is something I may be alone in. How can they not bring back the Khan via fighting Fulgrim to get back into real space with Fulgrim and Dark Elder on his tails, who end up fighting each other? I do think that's a good idea. So I guess, that's one thing. So the other thing that Games Workshop have been revealing lately is that we are getting Emperor's Children. They're getting a whole new focus in the future. They'll be getting a new model range. They'll be getting a codex. And with the Emperor's Children, of course, comes their Primarch. Now, we've had two Emperor's Children books this year. One is about Eidolon, which is a relatively short book, and it kind of covers. I actually quite liked, because if the nice thing about that kind of book is it fills in a lot of the gaps in the Heresy, because the Heresy is a very, very long series, but weirdly there are a lot of gaps that were yet to be filled in. So, for example, they wrote the Heresy, and at no point they explained where Luther fell to chaos. They didn't really go into it. They just go like, oh, he found a book. But so they had to go back and write a Luther novel after they'd finished the Heresy, or towards the end at the very least. And this is kind of like a similar thing with this Eidolon book, where it does a lot to explain the Emperor's Children and their relationship with demons, and how you kind of see them falling into decadence. Because the Emperor's Children make some big leaps if you kind of just read the Heresy chronologically. They the book Fulgrim kind of covers their fall, but then all of a sudden it just sweeps through the Legion very quickly, and you're like, what happens to the rest of the Emperor's Children? But Eidolon kind of fills in that gap, which is pretty cool. The other book was Lord of Excess, which was really cool. I like that book a lot. That was another what's it called? Renegade's novel. So similar to Harrow Master, and it covers this Chaos Lord called Xantine, who emerges on the other side of the Great Rift, and there's a world that he tries to corrupt, but it's already been corrupted by something else, it turns out, which leads to some rather funny hijinks, I think it's fair to say. So I actually really like that book. But I've kind of been putting those away because I've been thinking at some point I'm going to do some sort of big Emperor's Children deep dive when they come out. Anyway, sorry. Where was I? So Games Workshop have officially said that the Emperor's Children are coming. They're getting a bunch of new models, and they've even released some art around the models, which is pretty cool. And when Fulgrim comes back, he's going to have a whole new model, and at some point that's going to mean that he's going to get this new lore. Now, officially, like the last real time we have seen Fulgrim within the setting is his battle versus Rylanor. That's chronologically in terms of like a timeline in reality, then we saw him, of course, fight Rabute Guilliman in the flashback that happens at the first start of Dark Imperium. So yeah, we've still got Fulgrim to come, which is pretty cool. And he's going to get a whole new focus. And the question is going to be, who's Fulgrim going to fight? Really, I think it's going to be a really good one, because he has to fight someone. Of course, that is what Warhammer 40K is about. In Grim Darkness of the Far Future, there is only war. And I'm interested to see, who people would rather him fight, because you have a few options. Of course, you have Lionel Johnson, you have Rabute Guilliman, and you have third party, right? Which could be like a Xenos character. You could have him come in and fight like a Gazgul, or maybe some sort of maybe new Tyranid or something like that. Or you could have him have one of the other unreturned Primarchs. I certainly, and if you've watched the channel for a while, you'll know, I think the Khan is the next Primarch to return after Fulgrim. However, that won't be for a little while. So the question is going to be, who is Fulgrim coming after in the meantime? I think Asdrubial Vect would be a pretty cool answer. Less of a fight and more of Asdrubial Vect trying to, trick him into, blowing him up somehow. But the Guilliman and the Lion are also great contenders, because the Lion is, a duelist, and Fulgrim is a duelist, and Fulgrim already killed Guilliman. So presumably, Guilliman is going to be very keen for a rematch, and Fulgrim, of course, was furious that he couldn't finish the job. Fulgrim killed Guilliman. He would have been the only Primarch to kill two of his brothers, which is a kind of a unique title he would have had. But yeah, I mean, who do you guys think? Do you reckon? Would you rather him fight Guilliman, the Lion, or something third party? Confitio, thank you so much for being a member for 9 months. Valdor, King in Yellow versus Abaddon, 1v1, who wins? Well, so they kind of have that battle already in the Heresy, in the final novel. They at the End of the Death Volume 3, they have a bit of a fight. It doesn't last very long, but that is the battle that seemingly has this huge impact on Valdor, and leads to him having this huge change of character, and something I've spoken about a lot. After that battle, and after the Emperor falls, ultimately, Valdor is notably different. He goes to this huge, he gives a very kind of long speech to Dawn about how much he laments Sanguinius's death and how sad he is to see Sanguinius die. But then when he sees Sanguinius's sons later, he's calling them animals and monsters and things drawn to blood and all that kind of thing. And he's a very angry man. Anyway, but this seems to have been spurred on by his battle with Abaddon, where he cuts Abaddon with the Apollonian spear and sees the despoiler become what he becomes, it seems, which was not something we expected to see, but very, very welcome. And at some point he's probably going to prepare for a rematch. Now, a lot of people would like to be the character to kill Abaddon, but I definitely think that Valdor's high up on that list now, because Valdor is furious and has been working very hard with some mysterious goal over the last 10,000 years, and taking out Abaddon may be it. I guess we'll see. I hope Fulgrim loses to a Phoenix Lord. It would be great to see that. That would be really nice to have an Azurman, probably Azurman, get that win. Would be badass. It's tough, and this is the problem with having the setting go on for so long. It's you have Jane Czar kind of semi lose at the very least to Talos, and so having Jane Czar kill Fulgrim, or at least banish Fulgrim, wouldn't really make sense. But someone like Azurman, has anyone beaten Azurman of note? I guess we'll see. But I have to check that. But Azurman is kind of the big boss, isn't he, in terms of Phoenix Lord? So it would be cool to see that battle. I think that would be badass, and it would be nice to have the Eldar get a win. As much as I hate to say it, because of course nothing gives me greater pleasure than the Eldar getting their asses kicked. But it's what it is. Fulgrim's special gift from the Emperor was 1, organization/mechanics, 2, super speed boost innate to himself, 3, regeneration. I'm not certain whether the regeneration is specifically just him, but I get what you're saying. The speed, I totally agree. And organization, mechanics. Yeah, I guess he is pretty good. I don't know if it's unique to him so much, but because of course I don't know if you'd say he is a better organization than Gilliman, but yeah, certainly he is a master. And to be fair, he's one of the technological geniuses as well, which is actually something underrated about Fulgrim, which is pretty cool. You think that Khan is coming back before Russ? I do, and I will keep believing that until Games Workshop really prove me wrong. But I am convinced the Khan will come back next. Well, sorry, I say that. I can't argue with you if you're like, I think Russ will come back next because he would sell he'd make a lot of money for Games Workshop. That is a very solid argument, not something I have a great counter to. But at the same time, in the books, Leman Russ is like the only Primarch they put effort into explaining why he won't come back anytime soon. And that is unique amongst the loyalists. So I'm interested to see, if they do that, I'd be surprised. Jagatai Khan, on the other hand, is the loyalist Primarch who they have put the most into explaining his imminent return. And that's purely going off what's in the books, I would say the Khan. But yeah, I did a whole stream on that actually. That's it's still up. Demon Fulgrim should fight Clone Grim and Jagatai as they team up. Yeah, I've spoken about Clone Grim a little bit on the channel. So that one of the things that it was definitely one of the things we were kind of looking to see if it gets referenced in Genefather, which was pretty cool. And it does get referenced a bit, but mainly in terms of Fulgrim, Fabius Bile's kind of insistence that the development of Clone Grim really proved to Fabius Bile that the Emperor's works are inevitably fallible. They will always succumb to chaos eventually. And even himself, he doesn't believe he is exempt from that rule. And so I don't believe there is any intention to bring Clone Grim back. But people really like the storyline. And it's one of the most popular plotlines within Warhammer 40K. So I'm sure Games Workshop have seen that. And maybe it will happen in the future. It would be very, very cool. But yeah, as it stands now, I'll be honest with you, I don't believe there's any intention to bring Clone Grim back. You're not alone. Abaddon has amazing depth and a story longer than most Warhammer characters. Thanks, Christian. Yeah, I mean, I think as well, I have like a like for Abaddon because they were hamstring in the nature of his character. And a lot of the old lore, my friend gave me one of the copies of his old copy of like the first Chaos Space Marine Codex, whatever it's called, and it's got a special name. And when he gave me that, I was kind of looking like in that Abaddon is kind of like this classic like overly bad villain, like blowing up planets, seemingly for fun, and that kind of removes a lot of the complexity. It's things they have to like write around, of course, when they want to add complexity to the character. Because as they kind of flushed out the setting, they inevitably came to the conclusion that you want to have complex bad guys. And so, yeah, they had their hands tied behind their back a little bit, but I thought ADB's work was great. I thought that Robert Rath's work was great. So, yeah, I actually really like Abaddon as a character. Can't wait for the Warhammer 40K show and Secrets levels on Amazon on December 10th. Looks like a good one. Mate, me too. I can't wait for that. And it's Space Marine 2 rates, isn't it? Which is going to be badass. I mean, something connected to Calth would be awesome. Can you imagine? It'd be badass. But Clone Grim is a lore dead end. Yeah, I see what you're saying. He was never going to matter, and he died with Josh Reynolds leaving. Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's interesting. I think that, to your point there, Christian, I think that from reading some of the things like, I think it was ADB was saying, the writers aren't overly happy on the idea of touching works that other writers kind of built up. Clone Grim was, as you say, Josh Reynolds' kind of baby. And so the idea that someone else just kind of takes it over it's not something people like to do so much. So yeah, I think people would typically kind of shy away from it. But as I say, if you do love the Clone Grim storyline, keep shouting about it online because Games Workshop do pay attention and they will write stories and release models that they think will sell well. And so yeah, it's pretty cool to see. By the way, doesn't the fact that Angron respawns after every 9 weeks or so diminish every battle he's in? Yes, but a lot of the time they can kind of just nuke him from orbit, I imagine, is how they kind of get around that. But yes, you are very much right. Or maybe, you know, if Angron spawns on a planet and he just kills everyone at that point, maybe he's just stuck. I think having the example of what he could become would probably either be the biggest deterrent or motivator for joining Chaos. I think his reaction to Demon Fulgrim will more than likely show his path. Maybe. The scene at the start of the Battle of Calth is probably my favourite part of the Horus Heresy. It was so visceral of a description. Are you talking about... There's a scene at the start of the Battle of Calth that I really like, where there's an Ultramarine and a Word Bearer. They are talking, and they're having like drinks. And these are like the last... It's a long time since I read this book. There's an Ultramarine and a Word Bearer that are talking, and the Word Bearers and the Ultramarines hate each other at this point. And these are like the only two that are still friends, 40 years or so after Monarchia, because they just happen to be long-term allies. And they're sitting having a conversation. And the Word Bearer all of a sudden goes, you know what would be crazy? Is if right now, if we betrayed you. And the Ultramarine is like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, like, for example, you guys are unprepared. You've got your like armada arrayed. Your defenses are down. We take you by surprise. We take out a significant chunk of your legion if we attacked you right now. And the Ultramarine kind of takes a second and goes, yeah, you're right. That's actually, that would. We're not prepared for that at all. That's tactically and strategically very astute. Like, yeah, so it's a really good point. And the Word Bearer goes, yeah, that would be crazy, wouldn't it? And the Ultramarine goes, yeah. And the Whereas, yeah, it would be nuts, wouldn't it? And the Ultramarine goes, yeah. And then the Word Bearer, I believe, shoots him. And that's like the first death. And I was like, that cracked me up, man. Because, yeah, it was kind of comical. But, yeah, definitely one of my favorite books of the Heresy. No Fear. Very, very good. And kind of a unique writing style. We need Decimus back. I think Corax will be next. Would be great to bring Slimarbo into the mix. Corvus Slimarbo team up. I mean, that would be badass. I'll give you that. But like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about Corvus. Corvus is again like a real wild card because we, of course, have the story that takes place, 1,000 or so years after the Heresy. But since then, as far as we know, Lorgar is out and about, and he is, raising chaos cults in the background of the setting. So we don't really. That therefore, begs the question: where has Corvus been? There's also I forgot the name of the book. Apocalypse. That's the name of the book. In the Apocalypse book, in the Apocalypse book, there is a Word Bearer that says to one of the members of the Raven Guard, there are still rumors that your father persists within the Eye of Terror, hunting Word Bearers. And so that suggests to me, at the very least, that therefore that's not confirmed. So the Word Bearers imply that they haven't seen Corvus Corax in a very long time. So the question has to be asked, what happened to Corvus Corax? Now, given that part of the Emperor dwells in the warp, I don't think it would be a huge reach to say that maybe they were in contact somehow. But yeah, I guess we don't know. Yeah, the dynasty was great, but I meant more the ship crashing through the plates. Yes, very true. Nuking Angron doesn't really work. God, can't do anything nowadays, can you? He can tank lance fire from battleships. That's true, I guess. I guess one of the other thing that comes to mind is in the what book will that have been? Like maybe Solar War. When Angron arrives in system, he's on the hull of the Conqueror, and they basically, and then he ends up rampage. Once Horus tells him he can't be the first to land on Terra, it will be Mortarion. Then he like rampages through a ship and Khan has to like trick him into going into the maze that Perturabo raised. Perturabo raised for the Night Lord for Conrad Kurz to trap Vulcan, and Khan leads him into this maze, and ultimately they basically like fire Angron at Terra, and so presumably he doesn't even burn up in the atmosphere, which is something you'd hope would would kill a demon Primarch. So yeah. Do you think it would work with the Alpha Legion infiltrating the Primaris Marines? You know what? Weirdly, yes. So Alpharius is shorter than other Primarchs. That is true. But also, because they didn't want to make Alpharius too short, they said that the average Alpha Legionnaire, I'd have to remember the book, it might be the one the Black Books, but they said the average Alpha Legionnaire is slightly taller than other legions, because so Alpharius and Omegon can easily switch in and out. And so because that's the case, weirdly, it's a little bit easier for them to infiltrate the Primaris Marines, because they're probably about the same height. So there you go. That works. Yeah, that works pretty well. But yeah. So is Dawn like Dead? Depends who you ask. So I don't believe so, because first of all, they retconned his body, what happened to it, which there's not really any reason to do that. Officially, they've never said he's back alive, and Conrad Kurz, for example, sees Rogel Dawn's death. However, kind of the point of that novel, a thing that is explored a lot in the Night Haunter novel, is that Conrad Kurz's visions are wrong sometimes. They can be wrong, and it's a huge development within his character, the denial of the fact that his visions can be wrong, and it is the kind of core difference between him and Sanguinius, really. So Conrad Kurz's visions might not be correct, and given that they changed it so that instead of the Imperial Fist having his whole body, they now have just one hand, I don't believe they would do that without bringing him back to life. And fundamentally, Rogel Dawn is one of the most popular Primarchs, I think, and I think he's all like an author favorite. So I think the authors would fight quite hard for him to come back to life. What's the most viable way for Dawn to return to face Alpharius? Attempt to revenge for his brother. Oh, to be fair, that would be, if I was going to kill Dawn, that would be a good way to do it. Would be to have, instead of him, like officially he's like killed by all these Space Marines, but one of the Space Marines and cultists that kills Dawn is actually Alpharius, which would be pretty, I think that would be cool. Having them kill Rogel Dawn, or in fact any of the Loyalist Primarchs, it would add some weight to the setting, wouldn't it? Like, can you imagine if they, brought Corvus Corax back, or Leman Russ back, and then killed them? And like, no one would see that coming, really. And it would, at that point, you'd probably be on your toes. I mean, if they killed the Lion or Guilliman, can you imagine? Because they got models not long ago. And so all of a sudden you've got the idea that it would make you realize they can kind of kill anyone at any time. So it would be quite interesting. But so if they wanted to do that, Rogel Dawn's the easy one. Didn't the Emperor technically bring back Guilliman when he died? So why can't he do that with any of the other Primarchs that have also died? It's a great question. So when Guilliman is brought back to life, it's not just as easy as like, oh, the Emperor reached out of the warp to do it. There was a lot of background to this. So throughout a lot of the book, or at least the final one at the very least, well, all 3 books, Guilliman's kind of attempting to understand more about faith. And he has various interviews with people to kind of understand more. And in particular, he's close to Matthew, who is a priest, who is the least annoying of the priests in Guilliman's eyes. And Guilliman is starting to understand more about faith and how it works. And one of the things that he ends up doing is working with this Eldar Farseer called Ilian Natase, who is seconded to the Ultramarines, having following Guilliman's kind of conversation with Eldrad Ulthran. Anyway, the Eldar Farseer ends up coordinating, it's something like 20 rhinos full of librarians, which would be about 200 librarians or something like that. And this Eldar Farseer ends up coordinating all of these librarians to conduct this ritual. And that is what allows... And at the same time as that, Guilliman gets like pulled into the warp by the Godblight when Mortarion kills him, as it were. And so, it's kind of a unique thing. So at the time of Guilliman's revival, he is halfway into the warp, and there are 200 or so librarians and an Eldar Farseer around him coordinating this massive ritual to connect him to the Emperor. So it's not an everyday occurrence. But yeah, I mean, if anything, Mortarion had to be a bit of a fool to walk into this, and no doubt the forces of chaos are somewhat aware of this now, and the next time there's a Primarch surrounded by a couple hundred librarians or whatever it is, then the traitors will know what's up. So I'm not certain it's something that can be repeated very easily. Having said that, the Emperor is more powerful than ever and grows more powerful every day. So maybe he'll eventually get to the point where he can just kind of reach out and bring the Lion back, or Guilliman back as needed. Any chance for Konrad Curze to come back? Clone Corona Nargs. So Sahal is referenced in the Night Lords trilogy. He's referenced specifically as one of the lords. They don't really know what's happened to him. And ADB was clearly didn't want to touch the storyline. He didn't want to close it, but obviously, as you probably are like pointing out, it seems too important. The Corona Nox, if you're not familiar, is this jewelry of Konrad Curze that some believe had a Wraith Stone in it, which Spirit Stone in it, which would have could potentially hold the soul of Konrad Curze. And the reason for that is because in the Lord of the Night book, the Eldar are very interested in the Corona Nox itself. And so it's suggested that maybe it's some sort of Eldar technology. Now, if it holds Konrad Curze's soul, Konrad Curze can in theory come back. However, again, just like we talked about with Clone Grim, this is another example where Simon, what's it called? What's the name of Simon Spurrier? What's his last name? Yes, Simon Spurrier. Oh, I'm very proud of myself for remembering that, right? Simon Spurrier, again, he doesn't write for Black Library anymore. He's still around, and he still writes, I think, other novels, but I don't believe he hasn't written anything for Black Library in a long time. And if I remember correctly, in an interview, ADB actually said he reached out to Simon Spurrier and asked for some, they wanted to have a conversation on what was going on with Sahal and the Corona Nox, but Spurrier never came back to him. And so he does reference Sahal, but as someone that is one of many Chaos Lords who has an artifact that they believe gives them a right to rule the Night Lords. And so, as far as we know, it's just like Clone Grim. It was lore. It's definitely still lore. It's not being completely removed, but there's no one in Black Library currently who wants to touch that storyline. But again, as I said before, and I say again, like none of the Black Library authors own the IP. It's up to Black Library, so it's up to Games Workshop. So if Games Workshop tell ADB to bring Konrad Curze back, he'd have to. He doesn't have to, but presumably he'd want to. And I guess we just don't know. But it's a really cool storyline. Maybe something I'll do a video on actually, because it's such an interesting piece of lore, and obviously it's very old. Some of the oldest Night Lords lore. That book, when it came out, was just after they were kind of like finishing up the foundations of the Heresy. So getting, even in that, there are some the nature of the Night Lords. You're starting to get this idea like creep in of them being these kind of sadistic, evil bastards, but it's not fully fleshed out at that point in them writing the Heresy, which is pretty interesting. So it's it doesn't entirely hold up, but yeah, mostly does.
And that's a wrap for today's stream. If you enjoy these kinds of Warhammer 40k lore breakdowns and discussions, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss me going live. For those of you who want extra content and to support the channel, consider clicking the join button. Becoming a member will give you access to more videos and streams and our Discord community, where you can chat with other lore enthusiasts and myself. Thanks again for watching, look out for any Chaos or Genestealer cults in your area, and I'll see you next time.